Hello everyone, Pete Merrick here. Today we're going to model a Walk of Fame in Cinema 4D. So let's just jump right in and get started with this project. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a cube, and we're going to go in and resize this. So the X is going to be 18 inches, the Z will be 16 inches, and let's just make this height 1 inch. Okay, so there's our basic base for this Walk of Fame. Next thing we're going to do is come up to our splines, create a rectangle. We're going to change the orientation of this rectangle to XZ, and we're going to input those same values, 18 and 16. Okay, looking good. Next thing we want to do is we're going to make this rectangle editable. So let's go up here, make it editable. Then we're going to go into our points and select all of our points on the edges, right click, create outline, and then we're just going to drag in a little bit, something like that. Looks good. Okay, let's go up here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to extrude this. So let's create an Extrude Nurb, drop this rectangle right inside of this Extrude Nurb. Now we don't want to extrude in the Z axis, so we're going to put that at 0. And let's just extrude this up in the Y. So this is looking a bit too much. Let's just type in 0.25. We could go ahead and turn on our garage shading with lines. That way we could see all of our edges. Alright. And let's just take this rectangle, this border, and just push this up. We just want a little bit of a border here. Okay, so let's go through and we'll rename this. We'll call this border. Actually, we can call it gold border. Okay. Next thing is we're going to create a star. So let's go into our splines one more time. Create a star. Now we're going to change the orientation of this as well. We want to change the points to 5 points. And then we're going to jump into our top view, and we're going to scale this down so it fits within that frame that we created. So let's make this about this big, go through and probably just rotate this slightly. Looking pretty good. And then what we're going to do is going to make this editable. Go into our point mode. I'm going to take these, let's go into our world axis up here. First thing before we do that, let's just make sure that this thing is aligned to the center. Just looking at this top point, making sure it's aligned to the blue axis. There we go. Alright, let's go back into the points, and I'll select these 2 points, just bring them down till we have a flat top on our star. And I'll grab this, kind of push this up a bit, maybe push this one up a little bit more. Maybe this one needs to come down, and this one doesn't look like it's exactly aligned to the center, so I'll take that, move that down a little bit. And I'm not really using too precise of a method here, I'm just kind of eyeballing this. Okay, I'm going to grab my scale tool, maybe just scale these out just a little bit. And maybe this one wants to come down, and maybe these want to come out as well. So I grab my scale tool again and just kind of push these out. Okay, there's our star. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of the points on the star. I'll right click and I'll say create outline. I'll zoom in real close and just left clicking and drag. There we go, there's the outline of our star. If you need to, you can always go back in here in your point mode, and if you wanted to tweak these points at all, make it a little bit closer, you can go in individually, just kind of tweak these. So I'll take these points and just kind of scale these out a bit, something like that. And I'll scale these out as well. These 2 end ones need to be scaled in. So let's do that. Okay, and I'm just going to grab this one, push this down a little bit, push these 2 down as well, and maybe scale them out. Okay, I'm going to take these two, and maybe these need to come out just a little bit more. Okay, so there's the border of our star. What we're going to do at this point, you can't really see it, it's hidden within the space. I'm going to take this gold border, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to reuse as much of this as possible. So let's go into the caps, and I'll just do a fillet cap and fillet cap on both sides. Make this 3. As you can see right now, it's just getting all crazy. So we're just going to make this fillet cap, let's say 0.25. Let's type in the same number down here on the bottom radius. It's looking way too big. Let's try 0.125 on both of those. 0.125. Still looking enormous. So we'll just play with some of these values until we get it to look exactly how we want. Okay, that's looking pretty decent right there. Maybe we need to bring this down a little bit more. So just a 0.1 I think would be okay. That'll give us a nice little beveled edge right here, rounded edge rather, for the light to be able to have some highlights on those edges. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to hit Command C, Command V on the keyboard, and we're going to delete this rectangle, grab this star, push it into here, make it a child rather of this Extrude Nurb. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to push it up until it protrudes through that base. Okay, and that's maybe a little bit too much. Bring that down a little bit. And now I'm going to go through and just rename this. Always try to keep your objects in your object manager organized and named appropriately. Okay, looking pretty good at this point. So let's go into the top view again. Maybe the star needs to just move down a little bit. Something like this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create the artist name, and feel free to type in whatever artist name you want here. So I'll just create a text spline, and then what I'm going to do is hold down, or I'll hit the caps lock, and I'll type in artist name and hit tab. Obviously this is way too big. I want to change this font. I'll go ahead and use a Frutinger font. Okay. Go ahead and find my fonts that I want to use. Where is this thing? Right here. Okay, and I'm going to use a 55 Roman, and now I'm going to take the scale of these letters. I'll bring those down. I want to change the orientation as well. Let's go into the top view and go ahead and make these smaller. And push this up a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to duplicate this extrusion that I created for the star. Hit Command C, Command V. I'm going to unfold this, take the star spline, delete it, take this text, and place it in there. Now I'll grab this, and I'll just push it up till it pokes through that base. And as you can see, we have some rounding on these edges, and that's exactly what we want. That's why we're reusing this Extrude Nurbs. Alright, now let's go ahead and rename this. Artist name. Alright, perfect. So now we could take this, and we'll, with the artist name selected in the object manager, we'll hit Command C, Command V on the keyboard, and now let's rename this donor's name. Donor's name. And we'll take this, and we'll just push this down to about right here. Now we're going to unfold this, go into this text object, and what we'll do is we'll type in donor's name down here, hit tab, and we'll probably want to make this a little bit smaller. So let's take this text object and let's just bring it down. Let's say 1. It's way too small. Let's try 1.5, 1.625. Okay, looking good. Alright, at this point, let's just change the axis on this. So I'll go ahead and enable my axis tool. I'll bring this up so it's centered. We'll do the same thing with the artist name. Alright, so let's take this donor's name duplicate it by hitting Command C, Command V on the keyboard, and we're going to change this to sponsored by, and let's just grab this, move this up, and we're just going to take this spline text and we're going to type in sponsored by. Okay, now let's take this text and we can make this small. Let's say 0.5 height. I'll take this entire thing. Just kind of move this up a little bit. And let's see what we have so far. Okay, looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and change this axis. Enable axis tool, bring this down a little bit so it's kind of centered. All right. Okay, moving along pretty nicely. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this star, and we're going to have two separate textures from the base to the inside of the star. So I'm going to duplicate this star by holding down Command and then clicking and dragging until we see this arrow clicking to the left. And let's just call this star inside. And what I'll do is I'll grab this star spline, and I'll turn off this other spline, Extrude Nurb rather. And I'll go into the points of this one, and I'm going to delete all of the interior points that were created by that outline. Delete all these points. Just hit delete on the keyboard. And now what we have is just a solid star. I'll turn this other one on. And now we could take this and maybe push it down a little bit. So it's above the base, but below that star border. Okay, looking pretty good. Next step is going to be to create a circle inside of the star. So I'll do that by creating a cylinder first. I'll go into my top view, and I'll resize this cylinder by just clicking and dragging this little node. Okay, looking pretty good. And then I want to resize the heights. So I go into the front view, grab this node, push this down, and then push this up. Okay, so at this point, we're going to add a little fillet to the edge of this. So let's create a fillet. That's way too much. I'll type in 3 segments here, and then 0.1 on the outside. How about 0.01 like we had the other ones? That's looking good. I'll take this and I'll push this down a little bit. And now I'm going to make this editable. I'll go into my Polygon mode, select my live select tool, and only select visible elements. I'll select this top, right click, and extrude inner. There we go, something like this. And now what we're going to do is grab, we can extrude that, extrude inner, then we can right click, extrude, and we're going to extrude that down. Okay, something like that. Okay, so there's the center of our star. Looking pretty good so far. Okay, now I want to take text and put that inside of this circle. So I already created this text here. It reads Agora. It's for the Cleveland Agora. That's what I did this for. So I just want to show you this text. It's looking a little bit too big, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cube and I'll just hit my scale tool and click and drag in an empty, oops, select the wrong one. Let's select the cylinder, select the scale tool, click and drag in an empty area. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger, something like that, so that it doesn't cut through the letters. And then I'm going to drag it down a little bit. And maybe it could be a little bit bigger. There we go. Bring that down. Okay, now we want to take this Agora text and just make sure it's sitting right, it's intersecting right on top of that circle. Okay, that's looking pretty decent. Alright, so next step, we're going to go ahead and texture this. So right now the modeling is finished. If we take a little test render, Here's what it looks like so far. It's looking pretty decent. At this point, what we want to do is just texture everything. So we'll go into the window, the content browser, and what we'll do is go into visualize, we'll go into materials, and let's go into stone. And I'll grab this granite, double click to import it into our scene. And let's just double click this. Let's see what this diffusion's doing. It's pretty good. Color's looking good. Specular, we could probably bring this down a little bit. Something like this. Don't want too much specular on this. And we'll just call this granite black. We'll need 2 different types of granite. Alright, so this is going to go right on our cube. Alright, if we take a render, this is looking way too big. So let's just grab this text, or this texture right here. And down in the attributes manager, let's change this to cubic. And then we'll take this length U, let's put this at 10, and then 10 here. Take another render, compare to the previous render. Looking pretty decent, but I want it a little bit smaller, so let's go 7 and 7. And take another test render. Okay, it's looking about right. Alright, perfect. What we're going to do now is we're going to grab this granite material, hit Command C, Command V. That'll create a duplicate in the materials manager. And then I'm going to take this granite and I'll rename it red. Okay, go into the color channel, and let's just, under this texture tab, let's just click this little triangle and create a layer. Alright, so now when we click this, we can go shader, color. We could change this color to some sort of pink, red, something like this. And hit the back arrow, change the blending mode to color. And that's going to start changing the color of our granite. We could bring this down a little bit. Alright, and now what we can do is find this inside of our star and just drop that right there. And now we're going to do the same thing as we did on the other texture. We're going to change this to cubic, and let's change the length U to 7, length V to 7. Now we take a render. That's looking pretty dark in there, so I'll go back into my texture, into my color, and let's try lightening this up. Let's create a new shader, color. Oops. We'll just create a white, and then I'm going to play around with some of these blending modes. Let's try overlay. Looks pretty decent. So let's take another render. It's looking a little bit lighter. Okay, pretty good. Alright, next step is to create the gold material. So I'll do this by going into the content browser one more time. So window, content browser, and we'll go into visualize, materials, and then metal. And then there's a metal right here, metal, gold. I'll double click that to import it into the scene. Now I'm going to double click this material and kind of tweak it a little bit. So I take this color and I'll just kind of push it more towards the yellows a little bit. I'll go into my diffusion. I could probably just turn that off. Reflection, I'll add a little bit more reflection to this gold. There we go. Now we're going to drop all this gold material on all of our gold components. So it's going to be on the gold border. It'll be on the star. We could probably just leave this texture at UVW mapping. And then I'll drop it on the star. Inside star is already textured. We need it on the artist's name. I'll hold down Command, duplicate it, drop it on the donor's name, drop it on the sponsored by, and drop it on the cylinder. Okay, so let's take a test render. Here's where we're at so far. We still need to texture this Agora text, so I'll drop this metal material, or this gold material, right on there as well. And there's our test render so far, looking pretty decent. Now we're going to go through and organize our objects manager. So we're going to take all of our gold components, and we're going to drop those inside of a null. We'll group these together. So let's take all of our gold, right click, group, and I'll just call this gold elements. We're going to need this as a separate group once we add an object buffer to this, and this will make sense in a few minutes. If I could spell correctly, elements. And now we'll grab all of these. Let's rename this cube as well. We'll just call this base. And now let's grab all these elements, shift click, right click, group objects, and we'll call this Walk of Fame. Perfect. Okay, next step is let's go ahead and add an HDRI image. So let's go back into our content browser. I'm going to go into the visualize, into HDRI, and I'll just use this hyperfocal HDRI cloudy. I'll double click this to import it into the scene. And let's just remove this. Remove this as well. Okay, let's take a test render. Let's go to our render settings. And for the test renders, we could probably just bring this down to like 400 so it goes a little bit faster. Take a test. Okay, looks like our light is coming from the bottom left. So what we're going to want to do is go into our hyperfocal HDRI image, and we're just going to rotate this a little bit. Let's just zoom out. So here's where our sun is coming in from this left. So if I just grab this and just kind of push it, so the sun is coming from the upper left hand corner. Now when we take a test render, should look a little bit better. Okay, so now our light's coming from exactly where we want, upper left hand corner. Looking pretty good. At this point, we're going to go ahead and set up our object buffers. So the first object buffer that I want to create is on the entire Walk of Fame model. So I'll right click Cinema 4D tags, compositing tag, and now I'll go into the object buffer tab and enable object buffer 1. Okay, we want to create an additional object buffer for the gold elements. I'll right click Cinema 4D tags, compositing, and create enable object buffer 2. Alright, so at this point, let's go into the top view. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this as the render view. Okay, so we're going to go into the top view, view uses render view. So now when we take a render, this is rendering from the top down. Okay, looking pretty decent. Now let's set up our render settings. Let's go in here and we could specify a 1:1 square. And you could set your width and your height for whatever you need it to be. If you want to go inches, maybe it's 15 by 15 inches or so. Again, when we're doing these test renders, let's set this down to 4. Let's do another test. And maybe we could zoom in a little bit more. Something like this, so we're utilizing as much of the space as we can. Do another test. Whoa, way too much. One more test, and we can bring it over just slightly. Okay, that's looking pretty decent. So let's go ahead and set up our final render settings. So let's render this out at whatever size you want. For width and height, I specified inches. It's 72 dpi, square 1:1 aspect ratio, film aspect ratio rather. Next step is, before we go ahead and save it, let's go ahead and enable multipass. We'll go multipass, add image layers. Now what we're going to do is we're going to delete the layers that we don't need. We're not going to need refraction, so we'll go ahead, right click, remove. We're not going to need caustics, atmosphere, or this atmosphere. We'll select all 3 of these, right click, remove. Okay, we need to add 2 more multipass layers for the object buffers. So let's add object buffer 1, make sure group ID 1 is listed here, and then right click again, object buffer, and for the second one we'll change this to 2. Okay, let's go into anti-aliasing. We'll change this from geometry to best, and then what else? We're going to add some effects. We'll add global illumination, and we'll add ambient occlusion. Alright, now you want to go into save, check that, uncheck regular image. You want to go into multipass image, and specify a save path here. We're going to render it out as a Photoshop PSD file. So click this, specify a save path, name your file. Okay, I just named mine Walk of Fame, and when you have all this set up, all you need to do is hit render and then wait for it to render, and we'll open it back up in Photoshop and do our final post-production tweaks. Okay, so I already rendered this out, so let's open it up in Photoshop. First thing we need to do is create a background that's white. As you can see in the channels, we have our object buffer set up for the two that we created. Alright, so let's double click this diffuse layer. Nope, let's create a layer below the diffuse, and we'll call this white. And we'll just pick a white color for our foreground and hit G on the keyboard for the paint bucket tool. Now we want to mask out this diffuse. So as you can see, our object buffers are not exactly correct. We wanted one that picked the gold and one that picked the entire model. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new object buffer for this selection. So let's hit M on the keyboard. That'll bring up our rectangular marquee. And now what we can do is just go through and create a new selection. Okay, we'll come up to select, save selection. We'll call this overall selection. Hit OK. And now when we go into the channels, we see we get this new channel that we could select anytime we want to paint on here. So we'll hit B on the keyboard, select, we'll go inverse, and we want to get rid of this gray behind here. So I'm just painting with black around here, hit deselect. Alright, this crop is a little bit off, so I'm going to hit the C on the keyboard, and let's zero this stuff out. Up here in the left, cancel, don't crop, let's hit C again, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give myself a little bit more border on this. Let's go back to the white, hit G on the keyboard, and fill this in a little bit more. Okay, perfect. Looks like we have a little weird line going on over here, so I'll just paint that in with white on this white layer. Or is it this layer? Yep, we'll have to, oops. What we'll have to do is just mask out our diffuse layer a little bit to get rid of this little border. Okay, so now let's just go through and see if we need to tweak any of these multi-pass layers. So here's our specular. We can leave that as it is. Shadow's looking pretty decent. Ambient looks good. Global illumination, let's try duplicating that, see what it looks like. I think that looks pretty good, gives us a lot more light. Ambient occlusion, I think we could probably use a little bit more ambient occlusion, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that as well. And I'll take this reflection, and that looks pretty good. Okay, at this point I'm going to take all my multi-pass images and I'm just going to drop them into a group, and I'll just rename this multi-pass, or MP for shorts. Okay, next thing is I'm going to create a few highlights on our gold. So I'll create a new layer, and I'll just call this highlight 1. And I'm going to go through, and let's select this object buffer. It's the second object buffer. That was the gold that we created. So I'm going to hit I on the keyboard, and I want to select this gold color, the flat color. I'll go into my color picker and just make this a little bit lighter. Now I'm going to hit B on the keyboard, and I'll resize this and make this brush really soft. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit the top of this gold material with a few highlights. Something like this. And then deselect. So now I have way too much highlight. I'm going to go into here, create a mask, hit B on the keyboard. Now I want to mask out like the bottoms of this stuff. Maybe this gets masked out over here. Want to reveal some of this. And let's mask out the bottom of this artist's name. So it looks like we have a highlight going on the top, and it's kind of gradating down. And maybe we could take this and turn the opacity down slightly. Maybe we can even play with some of these blending modes. Let's try overlay. That's not good. What about screen? Screen's looking pretty decent. We could still bring down the opacity a little bit. Okay, I'm going to create one more highlight layer. So create a new layer. I'll call this highlight 2. And I'll go back in and I'll select, actually before I do that, let's go through, select or hit L on the keyboard. That'll bring up our Polygon Lasso tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some really sharp looking reflections. Shift, create some more reflections here. And I'll just create a third row of reflections right there. Okay, now I'll hit B on the keyboard and just kind of paint this in. Hit Command D on the keyboard to deselect. Now I'll create a new layer mask. I'll command click our object buffer 2, and what I'm going to do is select inverse, and then I'm going to mask this out by painting with black on our mask. Deselect. I'm going to take this, let's put this on a screen blending mode as well. I'll bring the opacity way down for the fill and the opacity. And what we could probably do is just mask it out a little bit more over here. And there's our final model. Again, this is Pete Merrick with Triplet 3D. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial and keep in touch. Thanks.